Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of Cracking the Cryptic, where today I'm going to take a look at the finale to the recent listener crossword, which was a puzzle called Doing a Sort by Elgin. Now, some of you may not know, but I used to solve the listener crossword a lot. I was once upon a time the record holder for the longest consecutive run of correct solutions, which I think worked out at something over 6 years in a row. I managed to solve this puzzle week in, week out, which was a significant drain on my time, but it became an obsession. And it was the reason it became an obsession was puzzles like the one that we've just seen. I was lucky enough one year to win the Solver's Silver Salver for being the most successful solver, and I was invited to give a speech at the end of the year and to award Puzzle of the Year to the best setter. And that year the winner was Elgin. So when I saw the puzzle was by Elgin, I no longer normally solve the listener crossword. It's too time consuming with 2 young children. It becomes a luxury too far. But when I saw it was by Elgin, I thought, yeah, definitely, I need to take a look at this, and how glad I am that I did. So hopefully some of you might have watched Mark's video where you'll have seen him solving the clues. Solving the clues in this puzzle, they were quite hard, but not absolutely monstrous. At least you got some help. Whenever you solved an across answer, you could just write it in. Whenever you solved a down answer, you got a very little bit of help for the checking across answers. And what I've done on the screen at the moment is I've recorded where the solver could have got to if he just solved all of the across answers. And you can see on the right hand side of the screen, hopefully, a list of the down answers that we still need to fit in. Now, we have this long preamble that we need to try and understand. So let's just read it quickly. Initially 1 across and 48 are unfilled. Well, we can see that on the screen there. We've got nothing in those entries yet. Solvers must sort each down entry into an order, possibly the original one, that fits. And as each is too long, also decide which characters to drop. So let's just pause there, because when I was first looking at this, I looked at answers like 5 down. And you can see that I want to put in the answer there, entier, and so I know I need to put an E and an N in. And it seemed to me that this was already 5 letters long, so how on earth was my answer entier too long for the space? Well, eventually I appreciated, well, it's because I sort of have to ignore this 1 across. So we're not necessarily going to be putting the surplus letter into the position here at 5 down. So whatever we put in here, which could be an E or an N, we won't put the other one necessarily in this position. And eventually I figured out that's probably what this preamble meant. And then we get this: sorting the letters marked star gives a description 266 of a 2-word title to fill 1 across. And sorting the letters marked plus gives an instruction 2435 yielding a 2-word phrase for partially filling 48 across, with 2 cells holding 2 letters each. Well, I suspect, like other solvers of this, that didn't mean much to me, but I was prepared to give that a go once I reached this sort of stage of the solve. Once I had enough letters to start guessing at what this anagrams might give. That was the point at which I was prepared to devote time to it. And that's a very good tip for doing the listener crossword. Don't try and do these advanced bits which go towards the finale at any early stage. Very, very rarely will that succeed, and you'll probably just end up with a headache. So then we have this thing: a final thematic adjustment must be made, leaving some cells empty, no 2 in the same row or column, and all entries except 1 across and 48 as real words, phrases or names. And then the blurb about Chambers' Dictionary being the primary reference. So what I've done is I've listed all of the letters that we definitely have marked in plus squares at the moment, and then the choices for the other 2 entries. So for example, you can see in this position here there is a plus in this cell. You can just see it on the screen hopefully. And the answer to this clue is went in. So we know that this is going to be a W or an E, but because these down clues need to be entered in a jumbled form, we can't actually tell whether this is a W or an E. We just don't know. And that's why I've got the W or an E as a choice in on the right hand side of the screen here. So we have this sort of odd start that looks like it's trying to say toilet. So 2, 4, 3, 5. And then we have the letters from the stars here, where unfortunately a lot more of the starred answers are in down entries, unchecked down entries. So we have a lot more choices for trying to generate our anagram of the 266 description that we need to try and get one across. So what do you do now? Well, I'm not going to pretend this was easy. It wasn't. I did start to try and look at whether or not the letters I drop from these down entries here could spell anything. So if we just have a quick look at that, you can see one down, the answer is casts, and therefore I need to put in a C or an S here. And I wondered whether, you know, taking the other letter, the C or the S here, whether we could start to spell something. So this would be a C or an S. This one here would be a U. In fact, that's the only option for that, because all of these three letters are checked in tune. So we only have a U left over. So we have a C or an S here, and then a U here. And then what's this going to be? This is going to be an R, or I think maybe R is actually given there. So yeah, that's going to be an R. Then Martin's here. So that would be a T. And then we hit another one where there's a choice, unfortunately. This is our N-tier choice. So we have an E or an N in this position. Who knows what this position's meant to be. And then a Y from Yentl. And then another letter that we don't really know, an A or an E, etc., etc. And I could see how there was a possibility that the first 8 letters here might give courtesy, or perhaps Courtney. I could see Courtney as perhaps a possibility as well, but it really meant nothing to me. And especially when we look at these 6 here, where there were a lot more choices into the positions, and there were just too many words that could fit in this 6-letter space to mean anything. I tried the same at the bottom as well, and you know, I could see how I might be able to get law at the start here. And I can't remember if I looked at the bottom right hand side. I think I did, and I think I may even have figured out that there was a possibility of Robinson. But again, I didn't think to Google Courtney and Robinson at this point. So overall, this was not a fruitful avenue for me. For others, maybe they would have seen the names Courtney and Robinson and it would have rung some sort of bell. For me, it definitely didn't. So I realised I was going to have to work very hard on trying to solve these anagrams. And anagrams are not easy at the best of times if you don't know what they mean, especially when you have you know, 2, 3, 4 or 5 alternate letters in the anagram. Well, eventually I worked out what this first one could be. I guess because it's a short phrase, and I knew what I was looking for was an instruction. So I knew that the first letter, or the first word of the instruction would have to, it couldn't really be to, or it could maybe be in, but probably not the word no either. You know, so eventually I figured out, I was pretty comfortable the first word would be do there. That sounded like an instructional word. And then I could see title. I mean, it's almost there in plain text. So I wondered whether title was the 5 word. And then you can back into it from there. The 3-letter word, well, that's most likely to be the, and I could see how I could get the out. And you can then work out, you can get the expression do sort the title. Well, there's only one title we're really looking at here, and that's the title of this crossword, which is actually phrased very similarly to this instruction. So this is telling us doing a sort. Now, so I started playing around trying to anagram doing a sort into a 2-word phrase. Now, there is a two-word phrase that I could see, and that's goods train. So I wondered whether this was what I needed to put somehow in this bottom row of the grid. Well, this wasn't that easy, but I think you're helped here by the word or the start of the phrase luxo here. Now, luxo can really, well, I think it can only end in an R. I don't think there's any extension that would make any sense or could even be remotely extended by the letters of goods train, even if we allow ourselves to use two letters in this particular cell. So the only thing this could be would be an R. Now if this was an R, then this could either be A or an AI, and again we're looking at something very difficult here to fit in. Bearing in mind that we know this is a B or a D, I mean the most likely thing here I always thought that this would be a D and this would be a U for a dieu. So again, I didn't really like using this for the R of goods train. And I was perhaps then drawn to air tie, which you can see down here. Now that did look like quite a good opportunity to put a T in. And then I could see how there was a word near here. I think it has an apostrophe then, ER. Didn't know what went in there. But then I knew this space here was an O or an N. So if I'm trying to make this into a word, I looked up in the dictionary and there is a word carotin. So if this was an O, I could put an IN in this space and an A here, like this. So this all of a sudden was starting to look like I might be onto the right lines. The extension of airtight, the way this all seemed to make real words, it was looking good. And then I could see how this would be senders, that would work. And then I tried to put a D here, O, it just doesn't look like it's working. Eventually I figured out, well maybe there's a gap in the middle here and I need to put the GO at the other side of the grid. S blank R G. Does that have anything in it? Well, it took a bit of time, but eventually I realized that in fact in Chambers Dictionary you will find the word sargo. Don't believe me? Well, here you go. Here's the Chambers Dictionary. I have it in electronic form. There we go. There's the word sargo, a fish sea bream of the genus Sargus, also sar and sargo. Wow. So this was the break I needed. I was so convinced now that this cell had to be a GO. So let's see if that might work. That would give us an O here. We've now got our two words containing, or two cells containing two letters. So I knew that the rest of it would have to be just single letters. And I know that this has to be, this was from tiara. So either this is going to be a T or an A. Well, ratio looks great. That definitely seems to work. And this has to be a W or an E. Well, again, intend, that's definitely a word. So all of a sudden, you're left with, I suppose the S could go either side. It could be the end of senders here. Or it could just appear in this unchecked position. But I was prepared to leave that for later. I can put the R, the A in here. And of course, making this this bit of progress is also confirming the message here. So I thought this message was going to be do sort the title, and you can now see that I'm getting the right choices of the T here from tiara and the E that I needed from the WE combination. So all of a sudden we're starting to make progress, but we're still left with trying to work out what on earth the theme of this puzzle is. I think there's two ways you could have got this at this point. You could have noticed that the letters that were being dropped just at the end of airtight here, which was from night air, I think. So we now know that we were dropping an N from 25 down. We know that we were dropping an S from 43 down, and we know that we were dropping an N from 34 down. So we're starting to get the end of something that looks like it might be an expression here, and it almost looks like it's confirming Robinson. And I think you could have maybe you know, if you Google Robinson and maybe Courtney at one across, maybe you get the answer that way. I did it the other way, which is I stared at these letters for some amount of time before I figured that one possibility for a 6-letter word there was comedy. And once I got that, an Ealing comedy was not far behind. And all of a sudden, I was onto the path for A, solving the puzzle, but B, unearthing the absolute genius that you're about to see in this video from Elgin. So, once you've got an Ealing comedy, you can, you know, you're looking for a 2-word title. That the preamble tells us that we need a 2-word title to fill one across. I think there is only one candidate, and that is the film The Lady Killers. So let's put that in and see what happens next. Okay, so there we go. We get The Lady Killers in here. And of course, in the positions where we had stars now, like in this position here, this cell here, we now knew which letter we could enter here, because we knew the other one was being, well, the one that we entered needed to be used in our anagram for an Ealing comedy. So we could put a C in here, we could put a D in here. Were there any other starred entries that were resolved? I can't remember at this point. Oh yes, these two here. So I think this was an E, if I remember rightly, and this was an M. And this was resolving some of these choices we had regarding when we said, okay, could we spell anything with these letters we were dropping? And again, you should always, once you find the theme of one of these puzzles, you should definitely go straight to Wikipedia and see what it can tell you. And obviously, there's a whole load of guff about The Lady Killers being probably one of the best films ever made. And there's also a synopsis, definitely worth looking at, and there's a cast list. And there we find some of the names of the characters that appear in the film The Lady Killer. And some of these you may find familiar based off what we've talked about so far. There's a chap called Courtney, there's a chap called Robinson, there's a chap that begins with Law, and there's Lewis Harvey. And Harvey, if we go back, could fit from the letters we would drop from the answers in this column here. You can see, for example, 21 down, the answer was Hewer. So if I was to put a U in there, I'd be dropping an H, which would sort of be in this type of position if we were in the normal reading order, just as the A is dropping now from umbre, the R from rumen, the V from volant, etc., etc. And that allows us finally to start filling in some of these unchecked letters, as I'm doing at the moment. So this was going to be Courtney, this was going to be Harvey, this was going to be Lawson, and this was going to be Robinson. And you can see already that there's a lot of real words appearing in these down entries now, which is, it's incredible in and of itself. If the puzzle stopped here, you would sort of admire how on earth the setter had been able to create so many real words in the down entries, having been under the constraint of dropping a particular letter to spell out the characters that appeared in the film The Lady Killers. But believe me, this isn't where Elgin stopped, because we now need to finally complete the puzzle. We need to understand this last instruction. A final thematic adjustment must be made, leaving some cells empty, no two in the same row or column. Okay, and all entries now need to be real words, phrases or names. And you can see quickly, if we look at, for example, 4 down and 5 down, well, they definitely don't look like real words at the moment, and neither does this very strange SGARRE word in 16 down. So there's still work to do if we're going to be able to make all of this grid make sense. So what do we need to do? Well, let's go back and have a look at Wikipedia. So Wikipedia, we've certainly seemed to have found 4 of the main characters, but we haven't found the Alec Guinness character yet, Professor Marcus. And you can see up here in the synopsis of what happens at the end of The Lady Killers. Apologies if I'm now going to spoil it for you, but it was released in 1955, so you have had a chance to watch it. But at the end, all of the criminals basically turn on one another and start killing each other. And Marcus is the only one left. He kills Lewis Harvey. Finally, with no one else left, Marcus himself is struck on the head by a railway signal over the tunnel and drops into another wagon. All of the bodies have been dumped into railway wagons, passing behind the house and are now far away. Could this in some way be relevant to the finish here? And well, the wonders of the internet sometimes can help us even more. Here is an extract from what happens at the end of The Lady Killers. Alec Guinness looking somewhat younger. Okay, and there you see it. So returning to the puzzle now, some of you may have spotted that actually our Alec Guinness character has made, or seems to have made, an appearance in the middle of the grid. There is the name Marcus. And, well, we can also see that if we were to move Marcus from here into the goods train, which is what we've just seen happen, we would start to spell some more real words. We'd get Antrim here, Luxor here, Adieu, which we were sort of expecting, and Senders here. So that would seem to be putting us on the right lines. However, we then have to read the preamble again and make sure that we meet all the conditions. We need to leave some cells empty, well, we would be, but no 2 in the same row or column, or we'd be leaving lots of blank cells in the middle of the grid here in the same row. So this can't quite be the answer. And this is where this gets even more extraordinary. If you look up on the diagonal here, you can see there is the signal, the raised signal that we just saw in the video clip. And believe it or not, if we move the signal, if we remove these letters here and put the signal down, as it happened in the video clip, replacing the letters of Marcus, and put Marcus in his final destination as a dead body in the goods train, we achieve this effect. And now all of a sudden we do meet all the conditions of the preamble. We now have only gaps, 1 gap in each row and each column. And let's have a look at whether we've created real words. We now have the word sales here rather than Salem. We have the word light rather than sight. We have Sarge coming down here, which is a word. Date, Aryans, Celt, Umber. And just as unbelievably, if we look at these down entries that have all been created now, there are all these across entries as well. So auntie has become untie, that's definitely a word. Aim, it's a French word, that's absolutely fine. Lobules, believe it or not, is a word in Chambers. Just to show you some of these words now, there's aim being the soul in French. Lobule, yeah, there it is. A small lobe or lobe-like structure. Arsenate has become arseniate. Now, I wasn't familiar with either of the words, but just to show you that they both exist, there's arseniate you can see there, arsenate or arsenate, a salt of arsenic acid. So this is a word, and sparer, well, sparser has become sparer, which is a word at least I'm familiar with. So incredibly, as well as creating our Antrim, Luxor, Adieu and Lenders down here, remembering as well that in this position, like this letter here has changed 2 words, as have several of the others. Elgin has created a grid full of real words, phrases and names, while executing the denouement of the Lady Killers. Now, Elgin does have form on this. He did make a puzzle a few years ago about a Laurel and Hardy film, in which, quite famously, a piano fell down some stairs, and Elgin created a grid where there was a piano on a diagonal, and it fell down the stairs and left real words behind and created new real words at the end. But I think this puzzle may, as a technical piece of work, even surpass that one, because to do what he's done here, whilst also dropping sequential letters out of answers that spell out the characters in the Lady Killers, is frankly astonishing. Yeah, I am lost in admiration. And that is why I do the listener crossword, because this, you know, you don't get genius like this in many other places. So thank you very much, Elgin, for showing us your skills. This is one of the great puzzles of 2018. I will be surprised if it's not the greatest at the end of the year. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks for watching this edition of Cracking the Cryptic.